This is the KTM 390 Adventure R. It's currently one of the most popular true lightweight adventure bikes on the market. A real do-everything bike from long cross-country highway trips, forest service roads, rocky single track, moto camping, or even a daily commuter that you can rip on the weekends. This bike aims to be the ever-elusive unicorn bike, and it gets a lot right. In this video, we're going to take a look at the spec sheet, testing the bike in stock form, then building the bike with $5,000 in upgrades, including tuning, and taking it out for a true test in the Colorado mountains. Highway, dirt roads, single track, water crossings, all of it. So without any further ado, let's dive in to the 2026 KTM 390 Adventure R. Alright guys, we got a really cool bike here, and I was not expecting to like this bike as much as I did. And this thing, I might have to get one for myself because I did end up liking this bike so much. Now right here, I have a 17-page document that goes over our entire build. This is our internal document that we use. It's our build sheet, everything that we did to the bike, as well as factory specs and all of that. But before we jump into the factory specs on this bike, I want to say something that's going to make this video make a little bit more sense about where I'm coming from. So I've been riding since I was 7 years old. I've always been riding dirt bikes, particularly street legal dirt bikes once I was able to legally ride them. So I'm coming from, enduro bikes, the KTM 450s, the 500s. That's what I've gotten to ride. Our previous giveaway bikes, those are all things that I'm very used to. This is the first adventure bike that I have ever gotten to ride, so it's very different for me. It's by far the heaviest bike that I've ever ridden, but it's really lightweight for an adventure bike. Now you might remember our last sweepstakes bike, which was a Husqvarna FE501S that we set up for ultralight adventure. And that was our version of a unicorn bike. The whole thing behind the unicorn bikes is that they don't exist. You can't get an ultralight adventure bike. Now the approach that we took on that one was taking a enduro, a street legal dirt bike, and adding things to it that made it more adventure worthy. This is the opposite approach to the unicorn bike, which is taking a lightweight adventure bike for the purpose of doing the dirt bike things. This bike has been called a unicorn bike. Our last bike was a unicorn bike. Two different approaches, one starting with the dirt bike, one starting with a true adventure bike. Anyway, let's get into the factory specs on this bike. So good thing I have the build sheet here. So this is a 2026 KTM 390 Adventure R. It is a 399cc liquid-cooled dual overhead cam 4-valve engine. And it's making 44.4 horsepower at 8,500 RPM at the crank and 28.8 foot-pounds of torque. Now those are the factory specs. We did do some stuff to this bike to increase that power. This bike has a compression ratio of 12.6 to 1, so yes, it does take premium fuel. It is electronic fuel injection, liquid cooled as we talked about. It's got a 6-speed transmission, which is great for the highway and adventure bike purposes. It's got a slipper clutch. It is chain drive, not belt driven, very important. And we geared this bike down to a 14-tooth front sprocket from the factory 15-tooth front sprocket. This bike does not have a dirt bike style frame. It has a steel trellis frame, which is very common with adventure bikes and street bikes. For the front forks, we have WP Apex suspension. It's 43 millimeters. It's got about 233 millimeters of travel. The rear suspension is your traditional swing arm with a WP Apex monoshock with 230 millimeters of travel again. For brakes, up in the front, we have a 12.6-inch rotor. It's a single rotor, so unlike some of your other adventure bikes that have two rotors, this one has one, saving a little weight. In the rear, we have a 9.4-inch rotor, and again, it's a single disc. And for ABS and traction control, this bike actually comes with a lot for its price point. So it does have ABS, it has switchable traction control, features that you don't really find on the other bikes in this class. For wheels and tires, you have your traditional 21-inch front and your 18-inch rear, all spoked, so this is your typical dirt bike setup. For ground clearance, this thing actually has a lot of height at 10.7 inches. I believe the KTMs and Husky 500s that I've been on, they're around the 12.5-inch, somewhere in that mark, so it sits a little lower, but it still gives you a ton of clearance on the trail. Seat height is coming in at 34.3 inches, which is a lot shorter than the Husky and KTM 500s that I have been on, but it's still pretty tall. Fuel capacity, we're looking at 3.8 gallons. This bike claims to get somewhere in the 70 miles per gallon range. You're probably gonna see lower than that, but it's still got a ton of fuel range for those extended trips. Your curb weight on this bike is 364 pounds dry, so without any fluids, and wet, this thing is 388 pounds with fuel and oil and everything else. Then with all the upgrades that we added to this bike, we probably added an additional 25 to 35 pounds of weight. I think that's a little bit of a high number. We really need to get a scale in the shop so we can properly weigh these things for you guys. Now, one thing I want to mention that makes this bike very different from the last giveaway bike that we did, the Husky 500 that was our ultralight adventure bike. This thing has significantly more oil capacity. The maintenance schedule is a lot easier than the 500s. This is a much less maintenance intensive bike. It's something that you could do the Pan American Highway on. You could go from Alaska to Patagonia without the maintenance headaches that the 500s typically have. It's just not nearly as maintenance intensive, and that's the big benefit that you get with going with a true adventure bike, is that it can really handle all the highway miles and distance that you're gonna throw at it. But anyway, let's get to first impressions on this bike in stock form. So before I built this bike out, I wanted to get an idea of what this thing was really like in stock form. Just by looking over the bike before riding, the obvious things stood out to me. The factory Mita Enduro tires are obviously street-oriented tires. Not for me. The mirrors are the typical fixed stock mirrors that I just can't stand. They always seem to get loose and flop around. The handguards were flimsy, like really flimsy and practically useless. The factory skid plate was an absolute joke and may as well have just been made out of aluminum foil. Not to mention there isn't a frame or anything actually protecting the engine. And if you've watched any of my previous videos, you know that I can't stand these massive factory rear fenders. Once I actually got on the bike, the first thing I noticed was the power band and gearing. This bike is very different from the low-end run to the 500s. It doesn't help that I've gotten used to the massive power gains that also come with the Takamoto tunes that we've run on our previous giveaway bikes. This thing came off the line slower and the power band came alive at 6,000 RPM with a red line of 10,000 RPM. But we were actually able to really change this behavior in some of the later upgrades. In my first 10 minutes on my first real adventure bike, I had to get used to a very different setup from what I'm used to. But I could immediately tell that a big reason that my confidence was low was because of the tires. I just didn't feel like I could fully trust them in the soft dirt by the hangar. The seat is noticeably wider, and I can see how this would be a joy to ride for longer stretches of highway, making something like the Pan American Highway something that would be very feasible for this bike. It did have plenty of power on the highway, and I got it up well above 90 miles per hour. Passing power was definitely not an issue for this bike. Now, my stock test of this bike was not extensive at all. It was a 20-minute loop to get initial impressions, and my dirt bike bias was definitely showing. This was just a new animal to me. I would have ridden this longer in stock form, but since this bike is a giveaway bike and it's going to be going to one of you, I'm saving the hours for our real test once we build this bike out. But I needed something to compare to. All right, now let's talk about this build out. Two things that I want to mention real quick. The first is a big shout out to our sponsors. Thank you to Motion Pegs, B&B Off-Road, Adventure Tech Pro, and Cyclops Adventure Lighting. Thank you guys for making this bike so much cooler. Second thing, with every new vehicle that we do, new platforms, we have to go through a pretty intensive research phase that lasts several days, a week, or more. This is getting onto Google, this is getting onto YouTube, Facebook groups, calling companies and asking them for their advice on part selections and issues with the bike, known factory issues, and upgrades that people typically do. I jumped into one of the Facebook groups and I asked them, what would you like to see on your Dream 390 build? And that's how we came up with our parts list. We ended up getting parts shipped out from all over the world, from Sweden, Australia, India, all of it to get this bike put together. Now, if you do want to see the full build video, there will be a dedicated build video that'll probably be 45 minutes to an hour long, just dedicated to the upgrades that we did on this bike and building this thing out. So if you want to see that, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. And if you want to see a full parts list with links to the products that we used on this, you can go ahead and go over to expeditionranch.com and it'll be on our current giveaway page. And now, let's jump into the build. I started with the upgrade that definitely adds 10 horsepower, and that would be the graphics kit from MotoPro Works based in Sweden. We cleaned and prepped the plastics with isopropyl alcohol, broke out the heat gun, and got to work. I loved the desert tan, tannish green secondary colors, and the KTM orange all together. It really makes this bike just look so badass. Next, we took the wheels off and replaced the tires with the Tusk D-Sport tires. I've really liked this tire in the past because it's an aggressive DOT legal knobby that performs well in the dirt, sport, but still maintains its highway manners. And this is going to add a lot of confidence on the trail. I started with the Vinesh Motorsports mount for our Adventure Tech Pro navigation tablet using the factory 2-bolt mounting system, then mounting the Adventure Tech Pro mount to the Vinesh mount, and finally the tablet itself. The ATP tablet is a rugged, waterproof, dustproof, vibration-proof, mil-spec 7-inch tablet running an Android operating system and built for navigation. It allows you to run Onyx, Gaia, or any other navigation apps without locking you into an operating system like Garmin. And you can take it off the bike and use it just like a normal tablet. I wired this into the ACC2 port on the factory harness so it fires right up when you start the bike. And we'll talk more about the ATP navigation tablet later in the video. Next, we got to work on the Tidy Tail kit from B&B Off-Road and the Skeen lighting from Cyclops. The B&B Tidy Tail kit gets rid of the massive factory rear fender and license plate holder. It was the cleanest setup that I could find for this bike, and it really gives the back of the bike a really clean, sharp, small look. While I was in there, I went ahead and wired up the Skeen lights, which is a great on-road safety device. It flashes when you hit the brakes, turn signals, and gives a pulse, making you more visible on the road. The system taps into the factory wiring harness, and I cleaned it up with some cloth-style loom for a very factory-looking install. The next electrical task was installing the Flex X Pro Plus tuner. Wow, that's a mouthful. This tuner does add some overall horsepower, but where it really makes a difference is changing the power curve. It adds a lot more power and throttle response to the low end and mid-range of the bike, giving you a lot more usable power throughout the RPM range. This one has 10 selectable maps through a handlebar switch, which means I had to take off the fuel tank to properly route the wiring for a clean install. This is a piggyback tuner, meaning it's not a reflash of the ECU. It actually hijacks the O2 sensors to adjust fueling as you go. But this wasn't the only thing that I was going to do to improve the actual performance of the bike. I also replaced the front sprocket with a 14-tooth sprocket, dropping it 1 tooth from the factory 15-tooth, which will drastically improve the torque delivery and off-road performance. The tuning in combo with the gearing ended up making a huge difference, as you'll see later on in the testing. The final electrical task was installing the Cyclops Aries lights. Cyclops makes some of the best auxiliary lights for adventure bikes out there on the market. And these lights wire into the ACC1 and ACC2 ports of the factory auxiliary harness. And with this setup, they can be controlled by the factory lighting switch, meaning no additional switches on the bars. You can actually program these lights to come on when you turn the bike on, when you turn the high beam on, or have them simply increase brightness when you flip on the high beams. I actually ended up moving these lights once we installed the crash bars. Silly mistake, but they look really sweet on the bars. Now let's go over protection. I added the Tusk Quiet Glide skid plate, which is a must for a bike that has this style of frame. It's a full 3/16 aluminum skid plate with a 1/4-inch high-tech polymer layer to help slide over rocks and prevents damage to the aluminum. This install is tied directly to the Tusk crash bars, as they use the same engine mounting bolts to install. Crash bars are a must-have to protect your bike in low-speed crashes, and these ones came together pretty great. We also installed the B&B radiator guard, which is made from CNC machined 5083 aluminum, and it protects the radiator from rocks, tree branches, and anything else that can damage the radiator and leave you stranded. Now, we pretty much got B&B's entire catalog for this bike, and these Australian guys really like their adventure bikes, and I was impressed with all of their parts. They also sent us their horn relocation bracket and shield, which takes the horn out of the path of destruction and puts a CNC aluminum shield in front of it. Now, this bike actually could have gone without the shield because the Tusk skid plate really covers the front of the bike pretty well. And B&B made an appearance again for the front sprocket cover. The original plastic one was removed and replaced with a full CNC aluminum one, and the nice thing about this one is you can actually clean any accumulated dirty grease without opening up your toolbox. And the last bit of protection was adding my favorite handguards, the Tusk D-Flex Pros. This is a full wraparound handguard, and the plastics are easily replaceable when you ding up the old ones. We did have to modify them slightly to fit the bike and drill out the pressed-in bar fittings. I wasn't going to use the thin factory bolts to mount these, which would have introduced a weak point. The factory mirrors were removed and replaced with my favorite mirrors from Double Take. These mirrors fold down easily, hold firm in place, and honestly, I just love the design. They go on every single bike that we build. Now for luggage systems, because when you win this bike, I want you to take it out moto camping, which means you need to carry your camping gear. B&B had one of the cleanest looking rear luggage racks for this bike, and I am so glad they sent us all these goodies. The rear rack install was super simple and straightforward, and we also got their side luggage panels, so you can really mount whatever luggage system that you want. There are plenty of tie-down points. It's made out of 5mm 5083 aluminum and serves as the backbone for your luggage system. For bags, I went with the Tusk Excursion bags as I've enjoyed them in the past. You could go with their larger Highland setup for this bike, but honestly, this was large enough for multi-day moto camping trips if you have the right gear. I also grabbed their Olympus tank bag and their fender bag so you're fully ready to go moto camping with this bike and explore the Colorado mountains when we fly you out. On top of that, we got the B&B Strap X kit, which allows you to add tie-down points really wherever you need them on the bike. However, I didn't install these as we didn't need any additional mounting points, but they're going to come with the bike anyway. Then finally, we installed the Motion Flex Mount Adventure pegs. The factory pegs are ridiculously small, and you can see just how much more room you have with the Motion pegs. These pegs use a skateboard style bushing to slightly flex forwards and backwards as you change your lean angle, allowing you to really stay connected to the bike. Unfortunately, these did not show up until after we got to test the bike because they were sold out everywhere. I guess it goes to show just how popular these pegs are. The final mod didn't really fit anywhere else, but it fixes a factory issue. We added the Tusk kickstand relocation bracket to fix the factory issue of the kickstand coming down while riding and turning off the bike. And now it stays secure. And after all of those upgrades, we have one lean, mean adventure machine. Now let's go put this bike to the test. So this is the fun part, getting to actually get out there and test the bike. So me and Roan, we loaded up my truck, got the bike in the back, and we were gonna hit Leadville, Buena Vista, Twin Lakes, and Taylor Park. I wanted to get a variety of terrain to test this thing on, so we wanted to get some street, we wanted to get some windy roads, some dirt roads, some really rocky roads, single track, whoops, to really put this thing through the paces and see how this bike performed with all of our upgrades. So first we hit the highway from Leadville to Twin Lakes, which is about a 20-minute ride before we hit the curves on Independence Pass. Now I wasn't expecting a big difference on the highway with the mods that we did, but the things I was looking out for was tire stability, new RPM levels after the gear change, and power differences. On the long stretch of highway, the only thing I really noticed was a slightly higher cruising RPM at 70, which was expected, but it was pretty happy there. Passing power felt better, but nothing really to write home about. But once we got on Independence Pass, I could start feeling the difference. I could test cornering with the tires, and surprisingly, I didn't notice any difference in stability with the much more aggressive knobbies. It felt planted and smooth. Coming out of corners though, I could feel the difference in gearing and the tuner pulling me out of the corners a lot stronger. There was a noticeable difference in the power from 3000 RPM and up. Even with this bike set up for more aggressive off-road performance, it still felt like I could ride the entire day on the highway, and that's the goal with the Unicorn bike. And after that, we headed to Buena Vista to hit the 4-mile riding area. This was my place to test some more aggressive dirt roads and finally hit the single track. And this is where I was very surprised. As a lifetime rider of 250-pound dirt bikes, I was amazed that I was keeping a very close pace to what I would have been on a much lighter bike. I mean, just watch this single track footage. In the tight and fast stuff, I was just able to throw this bike around. Turning off the traction control let me hit the back brake to slide into corners fast, and it didn't take me long to learn how to keep this bike in the power band. Even when I let the RPMs drop, that lower gearing and tuner really pulled me through so much better than it would have before. I was having an absolute blast on a bike that weighed in at 400 pounds with all the upgrades. And that is really light for an adventure bike. If I did lose power at all, a very slight slip of the clutch solved it real fast. And obviously these tires really boost the confidence. I really can't get over just how much fun I had in the single track. And to give reference here, I'm pretty tame on these giveaway bikes because it would be a nightmare to lay the bike down hard. It felt suspiciously comfortable for the first time on an adventure bike, kind of like a dual sport. Is this actually the elusive Unicorn? Now, where I did feel the weight was the more technical sections. While most of it was pretty easy, there were parts that I had to kick off the rocks as I navigated a larger bike. The whoops felt pretty good, but it wasn't a stiff suspension dirt bike. The suspension was definitely softer, and I did feel like if I went too hard on it, the bike could bottom out. But overall, I was really surprised. I wasn't expecting to feel this confident in the bike right out of the gate. Later that day, we went back to Leadville, rode up to the mining district, and took some really great photos of the bike. The Adventure Tech Pro tablet made finding all the historic sites and navigating an unfamiliar place very easy. This might be my favorite upgrade because it really made this thing into an exploration vehicle. It could go on the terrain that I wanted, be rowdy on the trail, but almost felt like I was driving a little home base around instead of a bike. And this might just be the years of riding exclusively dirt bikes that's talking right now, but that's how it felt. That day of testing ended with riding into town, parking on Main Street, and grabbing a drink with my lady.
I don't really know how to explain it, but the adventure platform, something that was just better on the street but still had the capability on the trail, it was just a platform that I had never experienced, and I really liked it. The final day of testing was in Taylor Park out near Crested Butte, and it's just an absolute off-road mecca. There's tons of trails out there, and all of it could be explored on this. While some of the places we went were limited because of the chase truck,
When you see that big rock, just bump it. Yeah!
I got to do a couple of things here that I didn't get to do the day before. I got the bike up to speed on very rocky dirt roads, and it performed as I anticipated. Smooth, planted, and plenty fast, but I did get to test one obstacle here that I didn't get to test the day before, and that was a deep water crossing. It did exactly what I thought it would do, but I just had to do it because, hey, it's a go anywhere, do anything bike. I liked this bike a lot more than I thought I would, and to be honest, this might be the bike that moves me from exclusively riding enduro dual sports to actually getting into adventure bikes. I could do everything that I really wanted to do on it. Sure, it didn't have the crazy slingshot cornering power, 60 horses to the wheel, but for the first time, I didn't really want it. This was a bike that made me think about the places I wanted to explore on, what distance I could cover, not how fast I can hit a whoops section. And it made me start thinking a little bit about my dream trip, the Pan American Highway. Anyone who really knows anything about unicorn lightweight adventure bikes knows that they don't exist for a reason. It's because everyone has a little different opinion, and they might lean more towards the enduro dual sport side, or they might lean more towards the adventure bike side. But overall, I think this bike really fits the adventure bike format with a dual sport feel. But it does it in the right places. On the single track and the technical trail, it feels a lot more like a dirt bike, which is what you want. But on the road, it just felt comfortable.
And unfortunately, this bike will no longer be mine after September 13th because this is a giveaway bike. That's what we do here at Expedition Ranch, is that we build out unique vehicles and we give them away to one of our lucky customers. To get entered, all you have to do is grab anything on our shop. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at just how much selection that we have, and that's all it takes to enter. Now, through these giveaways that we've done, we've been able to raise a total of $50,000 through our giveaways and through the partnerships that we've made for the trails and the places that we love to get out and explore. We've supported the Blue Ribbon Coalition and Tread Lightly since we started in 2024, and it's made a lot of great things possible. Aside from protecting our trails, it's made our winter stories possible, and it's made content like this possible too. So anyways, click the link below, get yourself entered to win this bike, and you might just be getting a call from me and getting flown out here to the hangar to pick up your new bike. And I'll personally show you some of my favorite riding trails out here. Anyways guys, until next time, happy camping.